I lined the candles along the dining table one by one, watching their flames flicker against the crystal glasses. 7 years. 7 years of Daniel's laughter, his promises, his anger, his silence. The table looked perfect, just like he liked it. White roses, steak done medium, his favorite Bordeaux breathing quietly on the counter. He texted me an hour ago. "Running late. Don't start without me." I smiled at the message, but it didn't reach my eyes. I had been rehearsing this night in my head for weeks, practicing every smile, every glance, every word I'd say. When the door finally opened, his voice echoed through the hallway. "Smells amazing, Claire. You've outdone yourself again." I turned, keeping my tone light. "Happy anniversary, darling." He kissed my cheek, the same familiar gesture that once melted me. Now it just burned. We sat. He poured the wine, his favorite, the one he'd saved for a special night. I let the glass rest in my hand, swirling it gently, pretending to listen as he spoke about work, new clients, and his latest investment. He never asked about me anymore. He hadn't for a long time. "You're quiet tonight," he said finally, eyes narrowing just slightly. "Something wrong?" I forced a soft laugh. "Just tired." "Long day," he nodded, unconvinced. That was Daniel, always noticing the surface but never what was underneath. The candlelight painted his face in gold and shadow, and for a moment I saw the man I married, the one who brought me coffee in bed, who made me laugh until I cried. Then I blinked and he was gone. In his place sat the man who broke things when he didn't get his way, who called me ungrateful and dramatic when I tried to speak. I raised my glass. "To us," I said softly. "To us," he replied, smiling. The wine was sweet, rich, almost too heavy. I watched him drink, every swallow echoing in the quiet room. He didn't notice how steady my hands were. He didn't notice how calm my breathing had become. Tonight wasn't about love. It was about closure, and Daniel, as always, had no idea. The morning after the anniversary dinner smelled like burnt toast and cheap aftershave. Daniel rushed around the kitchen, talking on his phone, already half-dressed for work. I stood by the counter, stirring my coffee, pretending to listen to his endless chatter about numbers and meetings. He glanced at me once, brief and distracted. "Don't wait up tonight." "Late meeting," I smiled. Of course, he kissed my forehead, barely touching me, and left. The door clicked shut and the house fell silent, the kind of silence that feels like a secret. I waited a few seconds, then walked to the window and watched him drive away. The sound of his car fading down the street always felt like freedom. That's when I unlocked my laptop. My reflection in the dark screen looked like a stranger, polished, composed, lying for survival. The desktop lit up, and I opened the folder buried deep under fake documents labeled Invoices 2018. Inside were screenshots, voice recordings and emails, every piece of truth Daniel never knew existed. A message thread appeared first. His words, "You're lucky to have me. No one else would put up with you. Don't embarrass me again, Claire." Each message was a scar, one I'd learned to wear with a smile. Then I clicked on the audio file marked Confession. His voice filled the room, the night he got drunk and told me about the accident years ago, the one he covered up. "It wasn't my fault," he'd said, slurring. "She came out of nowhere." But he'd been drinking that night. He never knew I recorded it. Every lie I've ever told him was built on the foundation of his trust. He thought he owned me, that I'd never dare to fight back. But I learned long ago that survival sometimes wears the face of deceit. I closed the laptop and rested my fingers on the cool metal. My heart didn't race anymore when I thought of him. The fear had dried up, leaving something sharper, steadier, purpose. I walked to the mirror and met my own gaze. "He'll never see it coming," I whispered. The woman staring back didn't look like a victim anymore. From outside, the faint sound of his car returning made me flinch. He'd forgotten something. His wallet, maybe. I quickly shut the laptop and straightened the kitchen. My mask slipped back on just in time. What he doesn't know is that the game has already begun. I heard them that night, Claire and Daniel, their voices slicing through the quiet like glass breaking. It was just past midnight, and the air was thick with that heavy kind of silence before a storm. From my window, I saw them in the driveway under the porch light. Daniel's hand moved sharply, pointing at her, his face flushed with anger. Claire stood still, arms folded, her voice calm but cutting, like she was done pretending. I shouldn't have listened, but I did. Every word? You think I don't know, Claire? He hissed. You've been lying to me. She didn't flinch. You've been lying longer. Then the slam of a car door, the engine roaring to life, and Daniel speeding off into the night. Claire just stood there, unmoving, staring at the empty road until the sound faded. I remember thinking she looked relieved. That was a week ago. Now the police are on my porch. Detective Cole, tall, steady voice, eyes that see too much. His badge gleamed under the morning light as he held a small notebook. Ms. Harper, he said, we're asking everyone on this street if they heard or saw anything unusual recently. You live next door to the Harris family, correct? Yes, I replied, gripping my coffee mug tighter. Why, did something happen? He didn't answer directly. When was the last time you saw Mr. Harris? I hesitated. My mind replayed that night. The argument, the rage, Claire's face. About a week ago. They were talking outside. It sounded serious. Cole's pen paused mid-word. Serious how? Loud, I said finally. Angry, but she wasn't shouting. She was calm. Too calm, he nodded slowly. And since then? I've seen her, yes. In the garden, mostly. She seemed fine. I almost said normal, but that wasn't true. There was something eerie about how peaceful she looked these past few days, like someone who'd just finished a long, exhausting task. Cole thanked me and left his card on my counter. As his car drove away, I glanced at the Harris house. The curtains were drawn, the blinds shut. Too quiet. No music, no laughter, not even the sound of her watering the plants like she used to. Later that afternoon, I saw Claire standing by the window, phone pressed to her ear. She was smiling, that same polite, rehearsed smile she always wore, but her eyes were fixed on me. For a second, I thought she knew I'd told the detective. When she waved, I forced a smile back, pretending nothing was wrong, but that night, as I tried to sleep, I couldn't shake the image of her calm face in that dim porch light, the face of someone who had nothing left to hide. Sometimes I wonder if the woman I used to be would even recognize me now. Back then, in the golden blur of college halls and coffee-stained lecture notes, Daniel was everything I thought love was supposed to look like. Confident, charming, the kind of man who made the world feel smaller just by looking at you. I was studying psychology, he was in business, and he always joked that I was trying to figure him out. I'd laugh and tell him he was impossible to read. I didn't know then that he liked it that way. Our first year together was a movie montage. Midnight drives, takeout under city lights, promises whispered against my hair. He said he couldn't imagine life without me, and I believed him. We got married 2 years after graduation. Everyone said we were perfect, a power couple, unstoppable. They didn't see the first crack appear on our honeymoon, when he got angry that I wanted to go out alone for an hour. You don't need space from me, he'd said, his smile too tight. I thought it was love. It wasn't. It was ownership dressed as affection. The fight started small. Things like where I spent my time, what I wore, who I talked to. Then they grew sharper. His words turned into weapons carefully aimed at the parts of me I couldn't defend. You make everything worse, Claire. You should be grateful I put up with your moods. Every argument ended with me apologizing. Even when I didn't understand what I'd done wrong, I started keeping a journal just to breathe between the pages. Every entry began with the same line. I don't recognize him anymore. He'd buy me gifts after fights, perfume, jewelry, a new phone. He'd hold me close, whispering that he only acted out because he loved me too much. I wanted to believe that, I tried. But each apology became a rehearsal for the next outburst. There was one night, the worst one. He broke a glass against the wall because dinner wasn't ready. I remember standing barefoot in the kitchen, staring at the shards around my feet, thinking, this is it. This is where I stop being afraid. But I didn't leave. Not then, not yet. Survival isn't always brave. Sometimes it's quiet, calculated patience. Looking back now, I think that's when the first lie was born. The lie that everything was fine. That I was fine. And when you tell a lie long enough, it starts to sound like the truth. It started on a Thursday, one of those gray afternoons where everything felt slow, heavy, inevitable. Daniel had gone to a conference in the city with his partner, Ryan Matthews. I'd heard his name a dozen times before, always followed by some version of he gets me or he understands business. I wasn't supposed to meet him, not really. But fate, or irony, decided otherwise. When Ryan came by to drop off some files Daniel had forgotten, I invited him in. Out of politeness at first. He was nothing like Daniel, his voice softer, his gaze steady but not invasive. He noticed the bruised edge of my wrist, the one I'd covered with a bracelet. He didn't ask, but I saw the question in his eyes. "Rough week?" he said gently. I shrugged. "Something like that." He smiled sadly. "Daniel can be intense." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It hummed, thick with unspoken truth. For the first time in years, someone looked at me not as property, not as a fragile thing to control, but as a person. I should have turned away. Instead, I let the moment stretch until it snapped. It didn't happen that day. It happened a week later when Daniel left again for another meeting. Ryan called. He said he just wanted to check in, make sure I was okay. I don't remember inviting him over, but somehow, he was there, standing in the doorway, rain dripping from his coat. We talked for hours, about work, about loneliness, about the kind of love that hurts more than it heals. Every sentence we shared was a confession in disguise. When he reached for my hand, I didn't pull away. When his lips brushed mine, I didn't stop him. The guilt came after, slow and suffocating, but so did the relief. Afterward, as he buttoned his shirt, Ryan said quietly, "You can't keep living like this, Claire. Leave him." I stared at the floor. "It's too late for that. Why?" His voice cracked. "You're not trapped. You can walk away." I looked up at him, really looked, and said the words that had been haunting me for weeks. "Because there's a plan already in motion," he frowned. "What do you mean?" But I didn't answer. I kissed him instead, silencing the question, because saying it aloud would make it real. When he left that night, I sat alone by the window, watching the storm swallow his taillights. My reflection in the glass looked unfamiliar. The same face, but different eyes. Eyes that had stopped waiting for rescue. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky like a warning. Inside, I whispered to myself, "It's already begun." The storm came early that evening, heavy and impatient, rattling the windows as if the sky itself wanted in. I remember standing in the kitchen, watching rain slide down the glass, the faint glow of the candles reflecting against the dark. It looked almost beautiful, a night too perfect to belong to what I was about to do. Daniel was running late again. I didn't mind. Every extra minute felt like borrowed time to steady my breathing, to make peace with what was coming. I set the table the way I had on our anniversary. 2 plates, 2 glasses, the good silverware he insisted we never use. Old habits die hard, even on nights meant for endings. When the door finally opened, his voice filled the hallway. "Smells incredible, Claire. You're spoiling me." I smiled, not trusting myself to speak. He didn't notice the faint tremor in my hand as I poured the wine. "Bordeaux again, the same one from that night." He laughed, saying I'd remembered his favorite. I had. He talked through dinner, about numbers and meetings, his voice a metronome of self-importance. I nodded, smiled, let him believe everything was as it always was. My words were rehearsed, timed perfectly between his sentences. When he finally lifted his glass, I watched him, the way his lips touched the rim, the slow swallow, the small sigh afterward. My pulse slowed. "Claire," he said, leaning back. "You're quiet again. I told you worry too much." "I know," I said softly. "But tonight I'm done worrying." He frowned, confused. "What's that supposed to mean?" I looked at him, really looked. The man who'd broken me piece by piece, who taught me to smile through pain, who thought control was love. "It means," I whispered, "I'm finally free." He opened his mouth to reply, but his words tangled mid-breath. His face paled, a flash of realization crossing his eyes. What did you—" The glass slipped from his hand, shattering against the table. The sound was sharp, final. I moved around him calmly, steady, like I was outside myself watching it unfold. His chair tipped over, his body convulsed once, then again. He gasped, reaching for me, but I didn't move. I just watched. The candlelight flickered across his face, painting it gold and red. When the silence came, it was deafening. For a long moment I stood there, the world shrinking to the rhythm of the rain. Then I walked to the sink, turned on the water and rinsed my shaking hands. The cold bit into my skin, but it made me feel alive. I picked up the phone and dialed 911. My voice came out small, controlled, trembling, just enough to sound believable. "Please," I said, gasping softly. "My husband, he's not breathing. He just collapsed. Please hurry." The operator's calm voice guided me through the motions, but I barely heard her. My eyes stayed fixed on Daniel's still face, his open eyes staring at nothing. By the time the sirens arrived, I was sitting on the floor beside him, mascara running down my cheeks, my shaking hands clutching his, the perfect image of a grieving wife. One of the paramedics asked me what happened. I met his eyes and whispered. He said he didn't feel well. Then he just fell. Outside, lightning flashed, painting the room in white for a brief, blinding second. In that light, I thought I saw Daniel's reflection in the window, smiling. The funeral was held on a Thursday, the same day I'd first met Daniel all those years ago. Life has a cruel sense of symmetry. The church smelled of lilies and rain-soaked coats, the air heavy with whispered pity. I sat in the front row, black dress pressed, hands folded tightly in my lap. My tears fell on cue, slow and graceful as if I'd rehearsed them. Maybe I had. The priest's voice droned on about forgiveness, about love that never dies. I almost laughed at that. Love had died long before Daniel did. Still, I kept my expression soft, mournful, every gesture perfectly measured. I was the grieving widow they expected me to be. After the service, people surrounded me. Neighbors, friends, colleagues. Jenna from next door hugged me too tightly, whispering, "You're so strong, Claire." I smiled faintly and thanked her, though the words felt hollow. Strength had nothing to do with it. Strength was surviving him. This was performance. That's when I saw him, Detective Cole. He stood a little apart from the crowd, tall, composed, watching everything with an unsettling calm. When our eyes met, he offered a polite nod and stepped forward. "Mrs. Harris," he said, his voice low, steady. "I'm sorry for your loss. I'm Detective Cole. I'm handling your husband's case." Case. The word lingered in the air like smoke. "Case?" I repeated softly. I thought it was natural causes. His gaze didn't waver. "We're still confirming that." "Routine procedure, of course, of course." The words were polite, but his tone carried something sharper. Curiosity. He asked about Daniel's health, his habits, what he'd eaten that night. My answers flowed easily, smooth and rehearsed. I'd gone over them in my head 100 times. Still, something in his eyes told me he wasn't convinced. That night, after the last mourner left, I stood by the window, staring out at the flickering streetlight. The house felt emptier than ever, yet I couldn't shake the sense that I wasn't alone. I poured myself a glass of wine, just one, and sat in the silence. Then I heard it. A whisper, faint, almost inside my head.
"Claire."
I froze, the glass trembling in my hand. It was his voice, Daniel's. I turned toward the hallway, heart pounding, but nothing moved. The shadows stayed still. It came again, softer this time, almost tender. "You'll never be free." The glass slipped from my hand and shattered across the floor. When I finally looked up, my reflection in the window was smiling. The morning started like any other since Daniel's death. Too quiet, too clean. I had just finished washing the dishes when the knock came. 3 sharp taps. Predictable, controlled, Detective Cole. He stood at the door, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Harris," he said, holding up a small evidence bag. "We found something while going through your husband's belongings. I was hoping you could help me understand it." Inside the bag was Daniel's phone. My pulse quickened, but I forced a calm smile. "Of course. Anything I can do to help." We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Daniel had died, and Cole pressed play. A crackle, a pause, then Daniel's voice. Faint but unmistakable. "If anything happens to me, it's Claire." Static cut him off. The rest of the recording was silence. My heart stopped, but my face didn't move. I stared at the tablecloth, tracing the pattern with my fingertip, pretending not to understand. "That doesn't make sense," I said softly. "Why would he say that?" Cole leaned forward, eyes steady. "That's what I'd like to know. Did you two argue often?" "Every couple argues, Detective. Did he ever seem afraid of you?" I laughed then, the sound brittle, too sharp. "Afraid of me? You didn't know Daniel. He wasn't afraid of anyone." He studied me for a long time, and I could feel the weight of his silence pressing against my ribs. "You said he wasn't feeling well that night," Cole said finally. But the toxicology report shows something unexpected. My throat tightened. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything, he said. I'm asking. I could feel the room closing in, every breath heavy with ghosts. I pictured Ryan, his face pale when I told him about the investigation, his panicked words echoing. They're going to find out, Claire. We need to disappear. And then he was gone. No calls, no messages, just vanished. Cole's voice pulled me back. You know, he said quietly, people think the hardest part of my job is finding the truth. It's not. It's watching someone carry the weight of it for too long. Something inside me cracked then, not loudly, but enough. The kind of break that doesn't make a sound, just leaves an emptiness where control used to be. You think I killed him? I said, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't answer. I stared at Daniel's phone lying on the table, the faint reflection of my face on its dark screen. All those years I'd been the quiet one, the careful one, the obedient one. The truth rose in my throat like a tide I couldn't hold back anymore. He made me do it, I whispered. Cole's pen stilled. What did he make you do, Claire? Tears finally came, not rehearsed this time. He made me small, I said. He made me afraid. And then one day I decided I wouldn't be anymore. Cole nodded slowly, eyes softening, but there was no comfort in it, only understanding and inevitability. When they led me out of the house, the rain had started again, soft and steady. The same kind of rain that had fallen the night Daniel died. They say prison strips you down to nothing. Your clothes, your freedom, your name. But it's not true. What it really does is strip away the lies. And for the first time in years, I can finally see myself clearly. My cell is cold, the walls a dull shade of gray that hums with quiet despair. A single photograph rests on the small metal table, our wedding day. Daniel's hand gripping mine, my eyes shining with a kind of innocence I can't recognize anymore. I touch the edge of the photo, tracing the curve of my younger face. They called me a monster, I whisper, the words echoing softly against the concrete. But I was his mirror. When I said that to the reporter last week, she flinched, like truth was something dangerous. Maybe it is. I close my eyes and let the memories come, slow and deliberate. The way Daniel smiled when he thought he had won an argument. The way his voice could turn from charm to cruelty in a heartbeat. How he taught me that love could be a weapon. And how to wield it in return. I didn't just want him gone. I wanted him to feel what I felt. Powerless, trapped, voiceless. Every drop of wine, every whispered word that night was my reclamation. My confession isn't about regret. It's about recognition. The door clanks open. A guard steps in. You have a visitor, she says. Detective Cole. He walks in, calm as ever, his hands folded behind his back. He studies me for a moment before sitting across the table. Between us lies a small recorder, the same one that played Daniel's final words. I wanted to see you before the case closes, he says quietly. For closure. Closure, I repeat, smiling faintly. You think it's that simple? He presses play. Daniel's voice fills the silence once more. If anything happens to me, it's Claire. That same sentence, just 7 words, has followed me through every interrogation, every sleepless night. But now, as I listen, it sounds different. Not like an accusation, but a prophecy. Cole leans forward. You could have left, he says. You had money, friends, a way out. Why this? I meet his gaze. Because walking away would have meant he still won. He studies me for a long time, maybe searching for remorse, maybe trying to decide if I ever had a soul to begin with. Then he stands, slipping the recorder into his pocket. Goodbye. Mrs. Harris. As the door closes behind him, I laugh. A soft, hollow sound. Married, trusted, betrayed. Words that once described us, now carved into my bones. Outside my window, the sun bleeds into the horizon, painting the prison yard gold. I hold the photograph up to the light one last time. In it, we look perfect. 2 people who promised forever. And in a way, we kept that promise. Because even now, in this cell, Daniel's voice still lives in my head. Still accusing, still echoing, I whisper into the fading light. You never really left, did you? Somewhere in an evidence room miles away, Cole sits alone replaying the same tape. If anything happens to me, it's Claire. The recording ends. Silence follows. And for a long moment, it's impossible to tell who really won.